Hi everyone, my name is Brooke Zaxey, and I'm here today to talk to you about effective literacy coaching, supporting teachers and students, and what that looks like. So, the first thing I'm going to talk about is what is student centered coaching, and my experience of what I thought it was. So, before I gained additional information about student centered coaching, I always thought it was the people who came in once or twice a year from our local county who came in and gave us some nice PD on something that was going on at the time, gave it to everyone, one big session sitting in the cafeteria, and that's what coaching was. And we're all better teachers because of it. And I now know that is not what it is at all. The experience that definitely stood out to me the most was actually right after COVID. It was one of our first times being back in the building, and we had people from our local county who were out to give us some coaching tips on how to work with students and improve data and work on different instructional practices after the pandemic, which changed so many things for so many kids. At the time, we still had kids who were virtual. We were starting the year off in person. All of our kids were back in person unless they chose to stay online. And I had quite a few special ed students who chose to stay online. And I will never forget sitting in that meeting or in that professional development session, and the coach at the time came around and said, oh, when you're working online with students, here are the things you're going to do. You're going to do this, 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 and it's going to be great. They're going to understand everything. And don't worry about it. It'll work. We've been telling everyone this. It's going to work. But what they didn't know at that point, I had checked out. I was done, which is not good. That's not what we want our teachers to do. But I had checked out because, one, the things they were telling me to do were to do live teaching on my computer with my students through Google or Zoom. What they didn't know is they didn't know my kids, and they didn't know my classroom, and they didn't know the situation our school had. We did not have one-to-one technology, so the students I had at home did not have access to laptops or Chromebooks at home. So live teaching through Zoom or Google was not going to work. Right then I'm like, oh, well, okay, that's not going to work. What do I do now? They also said, you can send videos of yourself, record yourself, and do these things. That also did not work because I had many students who didn't have internet access. We're a very rural school district and a district that has a lot of poverty. So with that, a lot of things that they were suggesting us to use weren't accessible. And I just felt defeated. I'm like, this isn't going to work. The things they're saying that are working for everyone aren't accessible to me. They're not going to work for my kids in my classroom. What do I do? And that's what the coaching was. And it was very defeating. And now I know, okay, back up, that wasn't coaching. And I now know what not to do. So as we go into the next slide, are what coaching is and what it isn't. So coaching is based on student data and student outcomes. That's why it is called student-centered coaching. If students are at the focus of what you're trying to accomplish with teachers and coaches alike, it's going to be much easier to get those outcomes. It's not personal, so it isn't just for the weak teachers. A teacher might think, oh gosh, a coach wants to work with me. I must be doing something wrong. I'm a bad teacher. That's not what it is at all. It is for everyone. Everyone has something they can offer and improve on, and that is what coaching is for, to see what is going on in your classroom and what do you want to improve personally. Which goes to the next, what coaching is. So coaching is collaborating with teachers to guide them to make changes in their classroom. So again, that's where that personalized piece comes in, where we're going to each teacher and saying, okay, what are things that you're seeing in your classroom? Because what you're seeing might be very different from the teacher next to you, and that's okay. The coach wants to collaborate with each teacher to figure out what is best for their classroom and their students. And like I said, that might be different for each classroom. It is not drive-by style, where kind of the session I talked about at the beginning of, hey, I'm here, I'm going to fix all your problems, here's what to do, I'll come back in a few months and you let me know if it worked. Not it at all. So it is not the drive-by style of coaching. Student-centered coaching is much more personalized than that, and the collaboration effort is meeting weekly, working on those things, analyzing data. I just did a mini coaching cycle with a first grade teacher in my building, and we were meeting at least once a week to talk about the results we were seeing. because I worked in the building with her, we were usually meeting on Mondays to go over our plan for the week, and then we were also meeting on Fridays to talk about how those instructional practices went, analyzing the data, and those were just collaboration meetings. Those were not the co-teaching meetings that we were doing together and the collaboration of instruction we were doing during the week. During the week, we were also modeling different practices. We were co-teaching, going back and forth to see how the practices went. The beginning and the end of the week sessions were just kind of analyzing the data on the students to say, oh, wow, this really was effective. This worked with the students. Or, yeah, this didn't work. Let's figure out how we can change that to get a better outcome for the students. And that's where that personalized piece comes in. Again, as I said, it's not for, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. I guess that goes with the what it isn't. Student-centered coaching isn't a one-size-fits-all approach because all of our kids are very different. We have classrooms that have gifted learners. We have classrooms that have English language learners. We have classrooms that have special education learners. And we have classrooms that have all those kids in them, all in one. And what you're going to do with those kids is not going to be the same as what the person next to you who has different kids is going to do. And I think that's why that personalized piece is so important, because if you feel that someone's coming in telling you, oh, these are the things that work, do this, do this, do this, and they don't work for your kids, then you're not going to see those successful student outcomes. And that kind of goes with the last, what coaching, student-centered coaching is. It's asking questions to guide teachers to self-discovery. And that goes also with the what it isn't. It's not telling teachers what to do to fix their classroom. Some examples I can think about this is the mini coaching cycle that I just did with the first grade teacher. We talked about, man, our kids are coming in this year really low on sight words. It's really hard for them to recognize high-frequency words this year. It's probably one of the groups that we've seen the biggest struggle with in regards to recognizing those. And usually we have students who are a little bit farther at this point in the school year, even though it is the beginning. They're recognizing more of those high-frequency words that are already starting to appear in our text. So the first grade teacher I worked with said, oh my gosh, what do we do? How do we get them recognizing it so they're recognizing the text? So what I didn't do at that point was say, oh, let's do this, this, and this. It's going to work. You go ahead and fix it, and then we'll talk about the data. It's not what we did. What we did, as I asked her, okay, well, what are some things that you think you'd like to try? I know you said you're seeing that the students are coming in with lower sight word knowledge and lower sight word recognition. What do you feel like are some things specifically that they need to practice and work on regarding sight word knowledge? Obviously, we know they want to recognize them, but just, I guess, specifically, are there certain words that you feel that they don't know this year that usually they do know? Is it a certain skill type within the words? Sometimes the WH words are the really tricky ones for the students. Are those the words you're seeing this year that are the tricky ones? Are they more of our typical, non-decodable words such as said, have, give, those really ones that are kind of the big rule breakers that are really hard for the students to understand? But asking her those questions and letting her tell me of, oh yeah, this is what I'm seeing. I'm seeing the kids really struggle with the WH questions. Let's start with working on those. She's telling me that information as the coach. I'm not telling her that. But she's able to see, oh, this is what's going on with my students, and this is how I can help them and come up with some instructional practices to work on those skills. And then I, as the coach, say, okay, I see, that makes sense. Let's try some of these instructional strategies. Do you feel like these would be a good fit for the classroom? If she says yes, we're going to co-plan our instruction for the week around those couple strategies, kind of implementing what she's already doing and putting some new things in with it to see if it helps with better student outcomes. Okay, now that you all have the handout on what coaching is and isn't, we're going to talk more about what a coach's role is. So a coach should be supportive. They are supposed to be supporting our teachers. That's one of the biggest roles of coaching. They're going to help the teachers identify areas for improvement in literacy practices and talk about discussions with teachers about necessary changes. I know the science of reading is a big one right now in the education world, especially in Ohio. There's new policies that are going to affect that schools need to be implementing the science of reading, and when you hear that, it can sound very overwhelming. So a coach's role in this situation is to, okay, let's figure out how to implement these changes. Let's look at what we're doing, and sometimes some of the things we're doing are already falling into the science of reading categories. but we want to look at what we're doing, see, okay, is this fitting the science of reading? And if it's not, we're going to work on not changing everything you're doing, but implementing some new things to meet those guidelines for science of reading, for example. And also, maybe we're seeing consistently through the data that our students are really weak in certain areas. We're going to look at that data and look on how to improve. I think an example of improvement specifically that we can look at is maybe we're seeing students consistently struggle with informational questions regarding a reading comprehension piece. And we're seeing the data, year after year, even though our students are changing, we're seeing our students consistently struggle in this area. So that's when we look at the data of, okay, we are seeing them consistently struggle. What are some things we can implement that would help benefit the students in this area? And I always like to ask the teachers here of, based on the data, why do you feel that students are struggling with this area? Why do you feel that students are scoring lower in this area? And a lot of times it leads to really good discussion from the teachers about what they see in the classroom, and I'm not in their classroom, so they are the biggest source of data of what they're seeing with the kids, and then it translates into the data on our standardized testing. So just kind of working on helping them support in those specific areas. Coaches also work on supporting teachers during initial stages of implementing any new curriculum. So as I mentioned, the science of reading, that's more of a new state mandate. But if your school is getting a new curriculum, I know my school district is actually in the process of adopting either CKLA or Wonders for next school year. So this is where the support of a coach to come in and kind of help work through those brand new curriculums and some of the instructional strategies and resources they have available to offer. Working through challenges, everyone in education goes through struggles, and it is okay for things to be challenging. The biggest takeaway for me from this, as a coach, is to say, I hear you, I understand you're struggling. What can you tell me more about those struggles, and how can I help you? I never want to say, oh, you're telling me all these things you're struggling about, here's how to fix it and go do it. I want to listen to you and hear what you have to say about why you feel that's challenging and what your thoughts on are fixing that first. And then if you want to ask for my opinion of what do you think, do you have any other additional resources, information to offer, that's when I'd step in and also talk to you about those. And then we can collaborate to come up with something to help with those challenging areas. That goes with kind of with that providing guidance. I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm providing guidance and guiding you on what might help you either overcome some of those challenges or work on implementing something new. And that goes with the next part of a coach's role, implementing. Often coaches are doing professional development sessions focused on effective literary instruction. So this might be modeling some new practices and new research-based strategies. Again, it could be some of the science of reading strategies that we're seeing come about, those explicit systematic fonts instruction strategies. Even just some new ones that maybe they've seen in a professional development session that go along with what the laws and standards are saying, and trying to implement that and see, if the teacher wants to use that in their classroom. A teacher might hear that and say, oh my gosh, that would work great for my students. I want to try it. I think this is a good fit. And if the teacher feels that way, then they can take this information back and use it with their students. It's also offering resources. So maybe a teacher says, ooh, I have ELL students this year, and I am really struggling on finding resources for them regarding how to teach vocabulary, because their native language is Spanish, and in Spanish, words like bark and bark only have one meaning, but here, bark has two different meanings. This is really challenging. A coach should step in at that point and say, here's some additional resources on how to teach those type of strategies. It's also just promoting a mindset of continuous improvement, helping teachers reflect on their practices, setting goals, and adjust instruction based on the student needs and feedback. So we are never saying everyone is perfect. No one ever has anything to improve on. I know I always have things to improve on and things I can work on. And even if one student is not getting something, we can look at resources and different practices to help the student understand and work on those needs. And even with setting goals, this a lot of times goes with the students. I like to get the students involved in setting goals. Again, with the little coaching cycle I just did with one of my first grade teachers, we wanted to see our students increase their sight word knowledge. So we made every student a little sight word tracker that as they mastered it, they had to read it 5 times in a row correctly throughout the few weeks that we had them. So once they were able to get, we called it 5 stars on these little clip charts that they had. Once they got 5 stars in a word, it meant they mastered it. They can consistently recognize that word, and then they got to go color in a box on their little chart that they had in their folders. And they would get so excited to go ahead and color in these boxes. And once they got to 5 boxes, they got to put an additional sticker on their sight word fluency charts. And it really motivated them to see, oh my gosh, I'm reading more words. I want to read more words. I want to keep coloring in bars, adding more stickers. So it's just kind of helping to work with teachers to implement those type of strategies in the classroom. And adjusting instruction based on student needs and feedback, again, every year is different, and you might have one year where students are really rocking sight words. That was the case for this specific teacher. She had never struggled with sight word recognition before, like the students are struggling this year. And based on the students coming in this year and their needs, we are seeing this is something we're going to have to spend a lot more time on, and that's okay. We're adjusting our instruction, or she's adjusting her instruction, to reflect the needs of those students. A coach's role is also to integrate things into the classroom and into the school community. So this is where coaches working alongside teachers to collaborate lessons that integrate effective literacy practices. So I know I talked about earlier, it could be implementing those science of reading practices that are really big right now in the education world, or just any type of practices. Those sight words, the ones that I just talked about, different instructional strategies to use those. We did a lot of center style work when we implemented our coaching cycle on sight words, and the teacher really enjoyed the different centers that we had. And after our little coaching session and our mini cycle, she said she wanted to continue doing the type of centers that we had set up and just switch out the content. So we are moving away from sight words, and the next thing she wanted to work on specifically was CVC words, and then transition to CVC words with blends and digraphs. So more of like the, I guess, consonant, consonant, vowel, consonant, consonant type of pattern words. And then coaches also co-teach along with teachers to integrate in the classroom. This kind of goes back to the first thing I talked about. It's not the drive-by method of, okay, here, try this, bye, I'll see you in a little bit. No, we work together to teach these practices. There was something she had never seen that I had done with sight words before. It was something called Right Brain Learning. I had these Right Brain Learning cards that have visuals and little kind of, I would say, funny movements that went along with learning the sight words, and she had never seen those before. So I modeled the lesson for her. I showed her how I taught it and how I was trained in teaching it. I modeled it for her so that she could also try it with the students, and then there was a day that we both tried it with different groups of students. So that way, if she had a question, she could come to me and ask me on, hey, like, can you give me some feedback on how I'm teaching this? Am I doing it correctly? Is there anything I need to work on that I can improve? And I got to see her teaching it, which was awesome, but also she got to see it from me of working together and to both work on the same strategy to work with the students. And the last part here is changing literacy practices. So this is identifying areas for improvement in literacy practices and talking with educators to facilitate discussions about necessary changes. Change is hard, and I know not everyone likes change. Talking about the science of reading again. We are getting away from the Lucy Calkins, the LLI, all of those methods that used to be the way to go. I actually, in undergrad, LLI was the big thing when I was in my undergraduate program for teaching, and I got into education, and then all of a sudden the science of reading started to shift, and we started to make the shift towards that. And I was like, well, what do I do now? Because this is everything I've been taught. And I was just taught this, so I shouldn't need to change, right? That was definitely challenging. But again, when we talk about why it's good to change, I think that's when teachers are more likely to buy into those changes. If you're showing them the data of, hey, look at these kids and their phonics recognition when they have the science of reading approach versus when they don't. And then the data kind of speaks for itself, and it's like, okay, let's try it. A lot of times we were able to talk as a group and say, what are your concerns? What are your worries? And a lot of teachers said that we're going to replace everything we've ever done. Like, this has been working really well for me last year. Like, I don't want to completely change everything. And that's when we can step in and say, don't worry, we're not going to change everything. We're just going to implement some new things, and you're going to implement them how you feel they'll be implemented best in your classroom, whether that's whole group teaching, small group teaching, having some different intervention groups working on these different changes. It all depends on what that teacher's classroom looks like and what the students in that classroom need. Coaches can assist in analyzing the student performance data with the teachers to identify trends and areas needing attention. That's kind of what Ty talked about earlier about the inferential reading comprehension questions. So maybe we're seeing kids are really struggling in that. How can we best help them work on and achieve those goals regarding that? Let's set some goals. Maybe they're only answering 60% of the questions, and we want to see them go up to 70%. And then talking about instructional methods on how to get there. Using the data-driven approach definitely helps teachers make the changes, and it measures the impact of the changes. So, when all of a sudden you're seeing, wow, now they're getting the inferential comprehension questions. We're answering them with 75% accuracy. These instructional strategies really worked. It gets teachers excited, and then they want to continue doing that. How a district's literacy goals and improvement plans go with student-centered coaching. So by aligning coaching practices with the district's literacy goals, schools can create a more supportive and effective environment for teachers and students, leading to improved literacy outcomes. Really what this means is, okay, if we're implementing a new curriculum this year, our coaches should be working on helping teachers implement that curriculum. It's not them going on, I really like this, so you should do this in your classroom too. It's, here's the big picture, how can we help you implement that in your classroom? And it's really, when it talks about the supportive environment, one of the biggest factors of student-centered coaching is the relationship you build with the teachers. If the teachers trust you as their coach, so that you're going to be supportive and that you're going to be there to collaborate and co-plan with them, they are going to want to seek out your help. They're going to want you involved in their classroom. And when you're involved in the classroom and the teacher's involved, that's when you see the greatest outcomes for students. Coaches can also help facilitate collaboration among teachers across grades and subjects, creating a cohesive literacy framework that aligns with the district's goals. This is kind of that community school approach and sharing successful practice and strategies. So what this means here is kind of those grade level meetings. I know some people may dread the grade level meetings, but maybe what one teacher is doing, another teacher didn't realize they were trying that strategy. So I like to look at this where, let's say we're teaching long vowel teams, and a teacher says, wow, my students are really not getting it. They're having a hard time. Do you guys have any ideas of how to do that? I don't want to jump in yet. I want to hear what the other teachers have to say, because they do have students in the same grade. Even though they're not the same classroom as students, they are able to see what their students are doing. And maybe one teacher says, oh, I'm using Secret Stories this year. I'm using that phonics program, and it's working really well. They're understanding it. The little tricks for remembering, when it says long E, when it says long A, are really working. They're remembering it. They're getting it. And then maybe that teacher wants to go ahead and implement that in her classroom. And she's like, that's great. I want to try that. How can I implement that? And then I, as the coach, say, I know how to teach that. Would you like me to collaborate with you and plan some lessons and model what Secret Stories looks like for you in your classroom? And then you can go ahead and try, and we can work together to teach a couple lessons on it. That is what it means to work together, be a team, and be a community. When all teachers buy in and are wanting the success of the students, that's when we see the biggest successes. And the last thing is that coaches can facilitate ongoing professional development that emphasizes literacy strategies by collaborating with teachers, modeling best practices, sharing resources, and culture of continuous improvement. it's kind of what I just mentioned about the secret stories. It really is just, always improving. And maybe that teacher didn't use secret stories before, but the strategies they had used always worked for them. And then now they're not working. So we want to try something different. Something else that is a component of successful student-centered coaching is supporting and integrating literacy across content areas. It is not just for elementary school teachers who are implementing and teaching literacy. I talk about that a lot because it's something that's very personal to me as an intervention specialist in K-4. But literacy is important across all grades, and especially as you get into the upper grades, teachers might think, I'm a high school math teacher, I don't have to teach literacy, but it's farther from the truth. Coaches can help identify key reading and writing objectives that can be integrated into all those subjects. When they get upper grades in math, all of those word problems rely on good, strong readers. So maybe they're seeing students are really missing questions and they think it's the math aspect, but it's not. It would actually be, the reading of it. They're struggling to read and recognize those key words that help them solve the problem. Coaches also provide training on literacy strategies that are applicable across the different content areas. This could be teaching reading comprehension, vocabulary development, and writing skills. In science, I can think of, for example, some of the vocabulary can get really tricky, so maybe students aren't remembering it. As a coach, I could say, what do you feel in your classroom students are struggling with? And if they say vocabulary, I could say, I have some resources if you'd like to try them. And if the teacher says yes, then we can work on implementing those together in their classroom. And the last thing here is that coaches model effective literacy practices within different content areas. This could involve demonstrating how to use graphic organizers for science experiments, note-taking strategies during social studies lessons. It's kind of the same on modeling those effective literacy strategies, but writing goes with literacy. Writing goes with reading. So now we're going to model some effective practices regarding reading. Coaches also support and implement interventions for struggling readers and writers. So by focusing on individual needs, coaches can help tailor their literacy instruction to meet the diverse needs and learning styles of all the students. Personalization enhances student engagement and improves literacy outcomes. So maybe this school year you have students who are really, really into the Pete the Cat series. You want to take that and run with it. You want to try to incorporate Pete the Cat as much as you can. Maybe you didn't do that last year, but if students are really interested this year and you're seeing that they're engaged in it and they want to learn when they're reading that, that is a really big component to helping them learn to read. And again, every classroom is different, every student's different, so making sure that the literacy instruction reflects those diverse and individual needs will help improve student outcomes. Coaches also help teachers assess students' literacy skills and analyze data to identify specific areas of struggle, using formative assessments, running records, standardized tests. Something I kind of already talked about, so I'll just skip that part. Coaches also demonstrate effective intervention techniques in the classroom, showing teachers how to implement specific literacy strategies, including phonemic awareness activities, guided reading sessions, literacy centers, or writing scaffolds. That is what I talked about with our mini coaching session and implementing some of those literacy centers regarding sight words. The last part here is that coaches curate and recommend resources that are effective for struggling students. They ensure that teachers have access to materials that align with their intervention goals. So, making sure that if teachers are saying, oh gosh, I'm really struggling with that, how can I get some additional resources or additional training to implement these type of strategies? As a coach, we want to make sure we are offering those to help the teachers. Coaches also support and implement new or existing reading programs. So, helping teachers analyze those student performance data to identify the specific literacy challenges. That allows for more effective interventions and progress monitoring, because if we're seeing, hey, students are really struggling here, how can we help the students where they're struggling? Again, it always goes back to what are the students doing and what's the data saying, and how can we help them become better learners? And teachers always want to help their students, so we want to help our teachers help their students. And the last part here says coaches model lessons or strategies from the program in the classroom, demonstrating how to effectively incorporate those elements. That's kind of what I talked about, the little secret stories lesson. Maybe that